Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little lamb.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
He made $50,000 a month. That's the definition of corruption. We know he got it only because of his family connections.
Huh?
We also now know the name of the whistleblower. The whistleblower needs to come before Congress as a material witness because he worked for Joe Biden at the same time Hunter Biden was getting money from corrupt oligarchs. I say tonight to the media, do your job and print his name.
Do you have any idea he was so short? I had no idea he was the little guy. He's the little guy. That was Rand Paul last night and an election rally for the state of Kentucky so that the most unpopular governor in the history of governors, apparently, doesn't get, well, they want him reelected. And like I said, the only way that Governor Bevin, Matt Bevin, would get reelected in Kentucky, as he is the most unpopular governor in the United States of America, would be because he has an R after his name, and Donald Trump is taking the state of Kentucky and the issues that face the state of Kentucky, such as Matt Bevin's cut for teachers' pension funds, the Medicaid situation, to nationalize this election in Kentucky. But that really stunned me. That really stunned me. Mitch McConnell showed up last night. This was so, even by Trump rally standards, hardly anybody showed up, I have to say. This particular place holds 23,000 people. The entire upper, level was empty. There were lots of empty seats. They estimate about 10,000 showed up. There were enormous protests outside of this particular venue against Donald Trump and against this Governor Matt Bevin. But when Rand Paul stood up there and said, we now know the name of the whistleblower. I mean, I have to watch this swill, so you don't have to. And we want the press to print his name. Why didn't Rand Paul break the law and say his name? Why didn't Rand Paul just violate federal protections for this person and say his name? I don't know. I don't know why he's such a little chicken, but he kept on saying it.
And I say to my colleagues, if Shifty Schiff will not let Hunter Biden come, and if he will not bring the whistleblower forward, every Republican in Congress should take a walk and say, this is a farce.
Oh, my God. And then?
And I say this to my fellow colleagues in Congress, to every Republican in Washington, step up and subpoena Hunter Biden and subpoena the whistleblower.
Now, you may notice they're all reading these, hand-delivered T-shirts that say read the transcript, and they're wearing them over their clothes. We would love to read the transcript. The transcript has never been released. Isn't that special? So you have an entire arena full of people wearing T-shirts that say that I should be reading something that I can't read because Donald Trump won't release it. And we know this because the testimony that has been given says that Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who was on that phone call in the Situation Room, tried to put in the word Burisma, tried to put in Hunter Biden, tried to put in investigate, and he wasn't allowed to. And as soon as the phone call on July 25th, this transcript of which we're supposed to be reading, which we don't have, as soon as Mr. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman heard what was being discussed on that phone call, for the second time, he went to a lawyer at the NSC. He went to a lawyer named Eisenberg. And Mr. Eisenberg decided that the right thing to do would be to put the phone call in a place where no one could find it, in a secure code word protected server. And now Eisenberg won't testify. Isn't that special? But we're somehow supposed to violate federal law, which goes back, I don't know if you know this or not. I tweeted it last night because I was so outraged by this. It's so disgusting. The Republican and the Tea Party freaks and the freedom crackers, their lack of knowledge or regard for federal law. You know, whistleblower protections go back to before we had a Congress, before we had a House and a Senate. Do you know that? It goes back to the Continental Congress. It goes back to the Continental Congress, which we had prior to the Constitution. We put together a Continental Congress after the Declaration of Independence was written. Now, I know I've lost all the Republicans because they don't understand that those two things didn't happen simultaneously. They just don't. But 7 months after the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1777, the Continental Congress passed a Whistleblower Protection Act. Seriously. To protect 10 sailors and Marines, by the way, who had reported improper behavior by the Continental Navy's most powerful man. You see, this man who was heading up the Navy in 1777 on the USS Warren, yeah, the USS Warren has always been in the fight for independence. Yeah. Anyway, he was the brother of a former Rhode Island governor and a person who actually signed the Declaration of Independence. And so this man, Isaac Hopkins, it's not important, had been appointed as the first commander-in-chief of the Continental Navy in 1775. And his brother was a member of the Continental Congress. But even so, this man who was appointed commander of the Continental Navy thought the Continental Congress was, some weird thing that he didn't have to pay any attention to. He thought it was a failure. He didn't think he had to respect it. He didn't think he had to obey it. He defied its orders. Sound familiar? Yeah, this has been happening since the establishment of this here country. And 10 sailors came forward and they filed a complaint. And this is what they said in the complaint about this well-connected Continental Navy commander. Okay? Quote, he has been guilty of such crimes as that render him quite unfit for the public department he now occupies. 10 signers, signed on to this statement. It goes further. But the reason why they did it was because they were worried that we wouldn't be able to recruit sailors if they understood, if people thought that it was, under the command of an unfit man who was denying, the Continental Congress's veracity and defying its orders, et cetera, et cetera. So they continued in their statement. They said, I know him to be a man of no principles. And quite unfit for the important trust reposed in him. This is James Sellers, one of the sailors, who accused him of cursing out the Marines and calling the Continental Congress a pack of damn fools and treating prisoners torturing prisoners, basically. They said that he was treating prisoners in barbarous manners in violation of the orders that the Continental Congress had issued, that all of the people all the British people that we captured be treated humanely. The chaplain of this unit, his name was Chaplain John Reed. He also signed on to this complaint. He said that the way that the prisoners were being treated were inhuman, and he added that Hopkins was, quote, remarkably addicted to profane swearing and set a most irreligious and imperious example. They said his conversations is at times so wild and his orders so unsteady that I sometimes thought he was not in his senses. They were arrested. They had to defend themselves, all 10. And in the end, the Continental Congress passed and signed, and the president signed whistleblower protection to protect them and future whistleblowers. That's how long ago it started. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.